This is the 6th EPS podcast short for season 2. The following segments were recorded a few weeks apart from each other during 2 separate visits to Strawbery Banke Museum in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and the subject matter of both parts are separated by about 6 decades. But what's interesting is that while Charles Lindbergh's famous solo flight across the Atlantic is quite a bit different than the release and popularity of the sitcom Frasier, both are commemorated using dinnerware, a plate and a coffee cup respectively. Take a listen to what each of these items tell us about the time periods that each were made.
So I'm here at Strawbery Banke Museum in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and Madison has stopped by the Discovery Center, and you discovered this commemorative plate with Charles Lindbergh's face on it, and it's from 1927. I think, well, at least that's what it's commemorating.
Exactly.
His flight across the ocean from New York to Paris, first manned mission. What about this caught your eye?
I think, one, because I've always been interested in the history of aviation. Lindbergh is one of the most famous figures of that history. And I also am pretty fascinated with the kind of memory of things and what is actual history versus what is commemoration.
Yeah, heritage versus history is the ongoing dilemma, right? Like
Yep.
And you're not going to get the whole story of his ordeal from that plate. You have to watch the movie Spirit of St. Louis for that, right?
Yep.
I remember watching that movie when I was a kid with George Bailey. What's his name? Jimmy Stewart plays him, and so from that point on, I just kind of pictured Charles Lindbergh going, "Oh, let's see, there's a fly around here. Is it going to land?" And so that's where I kind of got my interest. Pop culture got my interest in Lindbergh as well. And I forget where I got that. So what you have is a plate. It's a commemorative plate.
Yep.
And I don't really remember where I got it. There's a good chance it was just a thrift store or antique store or something like that. I was telling you before I started, I actually had the opportunity. I met his daughter Reeve a couple years ago, and I presented this plate to her. And I mean, she had seen all sorts of commemorative items about her father. And she was born well after he made this flight, but she's like, I'd never seen this one before. So the question that you chose is, why was it made? Why did they make it? Why do you think it was made a plate of all things that they could?
Right. Well, a plate would have been something that would have probably been in a major, center of community in a home and seen often. This probably wouldn't have been a plate that was eaten off of.
Yeah, I hope not.
It's a good solid piece. It's not going to break easily. But, we make things that we are familiar with, and plates are one of those things we use every day. So.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, and I don't know if you recall this now, but they used to have like infomercials all the time for commemorative plates, and that seems to have kind of cut off early 90s. I don't really remember much beyond that, but everything from Star Trek commemorative plates to...
it made me wonder if this was part of a series. If there's other ones that maybe commemorated other things in the 20s or other major aviation.
That's a good point. It might not be just a single... one. And regardless, I think you nailed it perfectly, though, as far as why they made a plate, because, and it tells us something about the 20s and beyond, that there was, like, what kind of household do you picture this being put up in?
Classically middle class.
Yeah.
Yep. Somewhere that they weren't buying extremely expensive things, but had enough money for a little bit of luxury. And remembering their American heroes.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. When people fly back and forth from Paris to New York and New York to Paris as we speak, and we don't think anything about it now, but it was a huge thing. I don't know if you remember this episode of Unsolved Mysteries. There was one. It wasn't a mystery by him. They know he made it, but supposedly right around the time that he took off for Paris, there was some French pilots that were trying to do the exact same accomplishment, and they never made it. And they think, and it wasn't too far from up here, up in Maine, that then there's the unsolved mystery that they remember some people back in the 20s report hearing, and they weren't used to airplanes back then, so they paid attention when they heard the sounds of an airplane overhead, and then they heard a loud crash, and they're pretty sure that's what happened to them. And I remember that one stuck out to me, and that was another reason that I was interested in the Charles Lindbergh thing, because it seemed almost like spooky in a way. That's like, he did this thing that it's on par with, 40 years later landing on the moon, right? It's not, and
it's fascinating though to think we had the space race. Technology all comes to a head at a very similar time,
right?
And all of these people are racing to do the same thing right at the same time. That's just who gets it first.
Yeah,
it's very similar to the space race. I didn't know there were other people going for it.
I don't know if there was like a prize involved or if it was just a mere, glory of being able to have it. And he certainly became a celebrity instantaneously.
Yes.
Because of that. And if you have a picture like this and everybody's home, especially if it's on plates and stuff.
But I don't think I had ever seen his likeness before seeing it on here. I knew Spirit of St. Louis.
Yeah.
But I'd never seen an actual portrait of him. It's funny to see it on a plate.
And almost by doing it, by having it on a plate and putting it in one's house like that, it's kind of taking ownership of the achievement in a way. I don't know if maybe that's going too far, but what is it?
I think those same people wouldn't have had a plate if French people had done it. So I think
good for him. Yeah,
definitely an ownership.
Or they'll eat off that one. They'll have their baguettes and on that one, but they reserve this one. And so I can I think you're exactly right. Middle class household. What does that therefore tell you about the capabilities of middle-class people in the late 20s, early 30s, that they're using their money to buy these kinds of things?
Exactly.
That they see that as decoration.
Yeah. And they had that extra money to do that, to have a piece of dinnerware that was never going to be used, that was basically like a painting that was going to stay in their dining room or their kitchen, and they had that extra space in their house to display it, which they probably had many more like this as well. Yeah.
Have you been to this museum before?
I have, yeah.
Okay, so you're familiar with how, as you go around to all the different houses, I mean, the layout, we could, if you want to come back later, we could do another one about a house itself, because the layout of the buildings matches what the culture is at the time and what the society is doing at the time. And not all of these had dining rooms. And that's where I'd probably see this, is a dining room, or maybe a kitchen, but probably a dining room. Yeah. And by the 20s, they're building even modest sized houses, specifically with a dining area involved. Yeah. Even some of the wealthier families that lived in this neighborhood, they didn't have dining rooms. They just had a room that could be used for dining, but most of the time they just ate in their kitchens. But by the 20s, kitchens were becoming a lot more efficient and not a place you'd really spend a lot of time in. You would get your meal cooked relatively quickly and then bring it out to a place there, a lot more foot traffic, and people will be like, oh yeah, I like Charles Lindbergh too.
Exactly.
So
and the fact that this was a much cheaper thing to make in the 20s than it would have been 40, 50 years before that.
That's true. Yeah. So. And it says a lot. So, I mean, we could actually go through all these questions.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
I really appreciate you stopping by and doing this Charles Lindbergh commemorative plate with me. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day at the museum.
Thank you so much. This is great.
So I am here with Michaela, and who is a archaeology volunteer here at Strawbery Banke Museum in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And you are the first person to take part in the new layer that I've added to this on-the-spot podcasting, where you reached into the mystery bag, and which might transform one day into a mystery box. I haven't decided yet. And what emerged from the mystery bag when you grabbed it?
So I decided to kind of reach around a little bit, and I picked one of the larger objects in here, and it's not made of plastic. I was like, what am I going to get? Because, archaeology, I was like, ooh, is there something ceramic? That wasn't really the reason, but I picked a mug that says Frasier on it from the show and NBC logo on the other side.
So I got this when I was a teenager, and I was touring the local affiliate NBC station where I grew up, and because my friend's dad worked there, and he just had a bunch of stuff, promotional stuff laying around, and he gave it to me. I'm like, oh, okay, I can, and I like the show fine. And I've really come to love the show since then, like watching reruns and everything like that. But I'm assuming that they also sold it, at the NBC store or whatever, and promotional thing. But the question that you chose to talk about is, who is the intended audience or user of this? And so we can go in two directions right now. We can answer two questions at once, because I'm assuming it's the same group of people. It would be fans of the show. So who is the intended audience of the show? Do you watch Frasier? Have you watched it?
I haven't actually. I know of it, and it's one of the ones that's like, oh, it's on the list. I actually don't remember what streaming service it might actually be on that I may have saved it on.
It's on more than a few.
Yeah.
And
I shouldn't.
My wife and I are avid Frasier watchers during the school year in particular, because we're both teachers, so we get up extra early. And while we're getting ready for the day, when we have our breakfast and we're getting ready, we always have at least one or two episodes on, because even though it's a spin-off of Cheers, which was, the Boston bar, centered show, and, kind of a more louder, energetic show, Frasier is so non-intrusive. It has nice, earth tone colors to it. It's about psychiatry. It's there's two characters in it that are both psychiatrists, and he works on a radio station, and so it's not a loud in your face kind of show. It's a perfect show to wake up to. It's very intellectual, because it's dealing with the main character is a doctor, and it's very and it stayed consistently good from beginning to end, and that's unique for shows. A lot of times they have a jump the shark moment, and it's no good. But like a lot of shows in that era, one of the main sets was a coffee house, and so it was Cafe Nervosa, and it takes place, as you can see from the symbol, in Seattle. And so coffee is the big thing in Seattle, with Starbucks and Seattle's Best and all those different coffee houses. So what do you make of it that they, instead of making a Frasier t-shirt, or a Frasier baseball hat, that they choose to make a mug? What does that tell you about the audience?
Well, now that I know a little bit more, I don't know how much time they spend at the coffee shop, but it does seem like it's something that the audience would want to almost be part of.
Yeah.
So instead of it being, okay, well, the cast would never, they don't have a hat or an item, they could do that too. Maybe an item that one of the characters used or wears a lot, but it's them being part of, actually going to that coffee shop. It'd be kind of similar. I mean, it's not called Frasier, it's called something else. but it's you can, you can kind of work yourself into the program by drinking your cup of, and unfortunately this one has a hole in it, so I can't drink it out of it anymore. But I used to use it pretty frequently. But that's such a good point, because we as television viewers have long wanted every chance we can get to be involved in our favorite shows. I was just talking to a woman yesterday about Wheel of Fortune. She was a longtime viewer, and then she became a contestant on it. And she said Shout out to my boyfriend's mom watching that.
It is a highlight of her, one of the highlights of her life, because it was I got to be on the show that I love so much.
Oh.
And with a sitcom, that's so. I mean, they don't have contestants showing up, so this is the next best thing. And they've done things like pop up like the Friends Central Perk set.
Yeah.
You can take pictures on the Friends couch and have your cup of coffee. And that's another show too. A lot of shows in the 90s, coffee houses, because Cheers was a bar. Coffee houses became the meeting place, not bars or other kind of restaurants. Like Seinfeld had a little bit more than a coffee shop, but they called it the coffee shop where they had their lunch and stuff, and they were always meeting there and chatting. Because the big difference, and you as a historian archaeologist know this, coffee is a stimulant and alcohol is a depressant. So if you're going to get stimulated conversation, coffee shops is where it's going to happen, right? And you're absolutely right about Frasier too, because most of the wardrobe with the main characters in that are suit and tie, and you're not going to sell like a $400 suit that just says Frasier on it,
well,
that kind of thing.
And also, it's more people would be able to also use it,
right?
Versus a beer glass or a shot glass or something like that as well. So it really it widens the audience as well.
How many are you a coffee drinker?
Yeah.
How many coffee mugs would you estimate that you have?
Well, I drink both coffee and tea, and I use certain mugs generally for coffee. Like I have like a diner mug that I like because it really is more of like that coffee look. It has that like the old diner.
Those like nice rounded edges and
thick,
ceramic.
And then I have certain ones I use for for darker teas because I don't want them getting stained or whatever. So I have certain ones, but I probably have a good couple shelves full.
Yeah.
And they're from very different places.
I remember somebody saying one time to me, they're like coffee cups, coffee mugs and T-shirts.
Yeah.
Reproduce in no time. Like you might have
ours in a while actually too. We used to have ours here.
That's true. Yeah. Just have them on standby because coffee break is such a part of our culture. Coffee any time of the day. It's not just a morning
Western
wake
too,
me up. So if you, since you're an archaeologist, let's just say 100, 200 years from now, somebody doing a dig comes across this mug. What assumptions would they make about it?
I think, if in that time span they would still know, I don't know if we're going with the fact that it's still in one piece or not. It may not be in one piece. So I'm going to go with it looking as it does now, where it's been repaired, but it is in one piece. They would probably still know what its use and purpose is. But they probably wouldn't know who the audience is in the same way. So I don't know if the markings on it, the name would still be on there.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to keep in mind. So we get a lot of things that it has a thick glaze and the paint is really just, it's not going anywhere. It's really etched in if it's porcelain, or we get things in one of our 1818 house, the Chase house that's set, it was 1700s to 1800s. We get some much older pieces that still look very similar to when they were made. Hard to know with this one. So I'm going to kind of assume that some of this might get rubbed off and they might be able to see only some of the words too. That may happen just because of the way it was made. Or maybe they see the symbol of the peacock. Yeah,
the NBC
and maybe
peacock.
Has that survived? Because that's still around.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the only thing left on there. So maybe let's say that's the only thing that they see on there. They know it's a mug.
They might assume some NBC executive lived in this neighborhood.
Maybe they could. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe I will bury it somewhere here and just see what happens in the next couple of years and see what can come. And going back to the fact that and I repaired it. Because I didn't want to throw it away. Yeah. And that says something too. I'm glad that you brought that up because coffee mug, unless you're really good at repairing it and you have the right kind of glue that you can put food back on. Yeah. Most people would just chuck it out.
Yeah.
But this isn't the only kind of. Nowadays there's a huge marketplace for glasses and mugs that have something on it, and after it becomes no longer used for its intended purpose, you can use it to hold pencils or just have on display, and just another one of those little signals to others.
Yeah.
This is the stuff I'm into. Maybe you are too. A great conversation starter, for sure. So I think that this is a a great first go at the mystery bag, and I think the fact that we're doing this quasi on the radio would make Frasier very, very proud.
That's true.
You know, that's the first thing that's chosen this. Thank you, Michaela, for stopping by.
Thanks, Eric.
And good luck on your dig today. Hopefully you find some cool stuff. If you find a mug that has, you know, an NBC TV show on it, that would be pretty amazing.
If it ends up in the ground, because that doesn't usually happen anymore, because people throw things away differently than they did in the past.
I always think about, I don't know if you ever watched that show, The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Yes.
Yeah. There's that episode where Titus goes digging in a landfill for a tape holder. And he's like peeling back the layers of time, and he's like, he finds like I forget what it was, like a Furby or something like that. He's like, oh, 1999, and like, you got to keep going a few more decades.
If it's all in the safe, it hasn't moved, then maybe you just go down a few more layers.
That's a good introduction to the crossover between pop culture and archaeology. But thank you for stopping by, and I don't want to hold you up from your work, but thanks again.
You.
Take care.
This is season 2 of the EPS podcast. I hope you've enjoyed what you listened to so far. Short episodes like this one, which are products of my EPS podcast live exhibits, will be coming out on Tuesdays this season, while longer episodes, deeper dives into subjects, are posted on Thursdays. If you like what you hear, consider becoming a patron by going to patreon.com/EPS podcast. Follow the show on social media, including YouTube, and especially on Instagram. I look forward to you tuning in again to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.